It is 5:31 on Monday, January 23rd, and I'd like to call this work session to order. First on our agenda are city updates, so Ms. Solano, please take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, City Council, and Mayor Gradisar. I have just one brief update this evening and then turn it over to our Health Director, Randy Evitz, for an update from the Health Department. And the one update is just an invitation to the community. On Friday, February 3rd, is a Mayor's Community Connections that you're all invited to attend. Our host is the Housing Authority, and special guests for the residents of those communities there. It will be held at the Vail Hotel at 217 South Grand from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning. Working with IT, the plan is to live stream it, and our Public Information Officer will be sending out on social media opportunities to ask questions in advance that the mayor can address in the community connections. And that's all the update tonight. There's more coming in Mayor's commentary and others, but I'll turn it over to Randy for the remainder of the time.
Great. Mr. Evitz, a Pueblo Department of Public Health and Environment update whenever you're ready.
Good evening. I'm coming to you with some good news. I know that it's rare that I've done that in the last few years, so it's kind of nice to have this opportunity to give you some good news. The good news is really that COVID cases are declining across the state. Pueblo case rate is about 44 cases per 100,000 in the last 7 days and a positivity of 4.6%. There was about 350 cases per day across the state last week, and that's down from about 1,100 per day in early December. And the 7-day incidence per 100,000 in Colorado is one of the lowest among the 50 states currently. We're about the 5th lowest. The challenge with that data, though, is that, as you know, the PCR testing, the public testing has been is not available anymore, and so many people are not testing, and so those rates can be deceptive. So we look at some other data indicators. One of those being hospitalizations. But the good news there is hospitalizations are also declining. This morning, we had 3 COVID patients in our hospitals. There were 196 hospitalized on January 18th across the state, and that's down from in the 300s just a few weeks ago. Colorado's 7-day average of those hospitalized per 100,000 is also among the lowest. I think we're 6th lowest there. All of the western states seem to be in a pretty low state right now. And as far as hospital admissions by county, if you look at the CDPHE data, they have 20 counties that they sort of compare, and we're about in the middle of hospitalizations for those 20 counties. So we're doing okay there. The other indicator is wastewater, and we've been, learning a lot using that data. That's kind of a leading indicator when we start to see the wastewater data indicating that the virus is present, and then we start to see cases that follow in hospitalizations, and that is also trending downward. So all of the indicators that we have suggest that we're in a good place right now with the COVID virus. Influenza has also made a run this year. Influenza A has been the predominant strain. We had an early onset in September or October instead of what you might expect in December or January. This year across the state, over 2,700 people have been hospitalized with flu. About 45% of those are age 65 and older. And the good news, though, is that it seemed to have peaked about the end of November, beginning of December, and we've seen a steady decline in that trend since that time. And today there are 4 patients in the hospital in Pueblo from flu. And finally, the other respiratory virus, RSV, you heard a lot about that about a month ago. We had an early season with that as well. It was quite worrisome for a while because the pediatric ICUs across the state were full. and they were transferring patients to adult facilities to try to make room for them. Today, we have 3 people hospitalized in Pueblo with RSV. So RSV is not just a childhood disease, it just often affects children more severely, but we do have 3 people hospitalized today in Pueblo. And that is my update on respiratory viruses. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Solano, and thank you, Mr. Evans, for that update. What questions are there from council? Councilor Flores.
There's a lot of news about what's going on in China, and it sounds like it's severe, if you believe what the news is telling us. If that were to move itself to the United States, what could we be looking at? Or
You know, I've asked the same question, and we've asked that on our state calls. We haven't, they don't seem to be particularly concerned about that at this point. It's a variant of Omicron as well. The one that we're watching currently is they call it XBB 1.5. It's the latest variant that seems to be a threat. It's very transmissible, but the virulence and the severity seems to be less than what we've seen in previous subvariants, and that right now is the variant that we're watching. We don't see that causing big problems or hospitalizations. So we think that we may be okay, but unless it mutates, the risk really with what's happening in China is that there are so many people that have it, and it's transmitting so quickly that every time it reproduces and transmits, there's a chance for it to mutate. And so that's the bigger concern, I think, coming out of that is that there's a high density of people getting infected, and that the virus can mutate and then transmit to the United States or other places.
my last question has to do with our boosters. I did take the booster probably September, along with my flu shot. Going forward, when does that dissipate and a person would have to consider another booster? At what point? And what is the timetable on that?
Yeah, so for the first few doses, it was about 3 to 5 months that we were seeing that was waning. However, the current variants seem to be Omicron variants, and that bivalent booster that you had in September was an Omicron, had an Omicron component. We are seeing some immune escape with the current booster, but we're not hearing any indication from the manufacturers or the government or anybody that they're going to require or put out even a new vaccine. I haven't seen that they're putting out a new booster yet. So the best that we can offer right now is for people to be up to date with that bivalent booster, and that seems to be where it's holding right now. So if it holds like the others, 3 to 6 months, but it may be longer if this continues with that subvariant of Omicron.
Sure, thank you.
Councilor Martinez-Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that presentation. And can you give us some information about the vaccines and boosters, where to get them, if money's an issue for folks and things like that?
Sure. Vaccines are available at most of the retail pharmacies around. We also offer them at the health department. If people can't get them at their local pharmacy, we do have slots at the health department. They just would need to make a call there. You can get them, I believe, if you're a patient at the community health center, you can get them there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Evans.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I wanted to quickly touch base about our retreat. I know that it was briefly talked about at our last council work session. Thank you so much for President Graham for filling in for me there. Our retreat is really important because right now the morning is really about department directors who are going to be informing us on their 2023 plans. And then in the afternoon, what I'd like to do is each of us bring at least one project, ordinance, issue, whatever, that we want to tackle for this year and actually give direction to staff then, so we can hit the ground running after the retreat and that they can be working on in the interim after the retreat. So I know that Councilor Maestri can't come on February 18th. or the next weekend. I was able to clarify with Mr. Kagosik that the February doesn't have to be the month that we do the retreat. So I looked at, we're looking right now at March 25th for the convention center for the same room that we used last year. If we can all please right now look at our calendars for March 25th, which would be basically from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. That way we can go ahead and reserve the room. March 25th. I have 2 yeses, 3 yeses.
So far, so good.
Yes.
I'm open. And
Yes.
there wasn't anything earlier in March?
The convention center is, President Graham brings up that it's spring break. I'm hopeful that we can all make this retreat because it is going to be very action-oriented in the afternoon. And my expectation as the work session chair is that we will all participate actively during this work
It
session.
is during spring break, though?
Madam Chair, I would just reiterate that it is likely spring break for the district. It may have impact to the department directors and staff who have children that'll be out of school. That's the only thing I could speak on their behalf.
Okay, so then our other option is March 4th for a smaller room at the convention center. That is the morning of the legislative breakfast, but we can always meet after that and just push it back for an hour. Would March 4th work better?
Yes.
Better. Counselor Maestri, Counselor Winter.
Perfect.
Excellent. Let's go ahead then and book March 4th.
I will forward that on. I personally have a vacation planned. It will not be in town that weekend, but the rest of the directors, I'll send that information to.
Okay. Okay, we're going to then tentatively plan on March 4th. I will have the mayor's office send out our agenda so you can all take a look at it. Like I said, in the morning, there's going to be department director updates on their 2023 plans. And then we will be inviting PURA to talk about the urban renewal districts, specifically the West Side projects for this year. And then CML to talk about legislative updates for this legislative session. And then come with one project or something that you want to work on for this year. Great. Moving then right along on our agenda, we're going to transition to talking about the Verkada video surveillance systems. So can I please have Mr. Long, Mr. Robertson to the podium? Yeah. And then I think we're joined virtually. I'm going to have Councilor Tenzio set this up.
Yeah, let me preface this by, we had a meeting on the east side with community members and business members. And out of that meeting came the idea that they wanted video recordings done, cameras on the east side, especially in some of the areas where there's a lot of indecent activity, they say. So I got online. I found Verkada surveillance systems. We talked to Mr. Robertson, and he's going to give us a presentation as to how Verkada works, and if it's possible, we just might do a pilot system, in areas of the east side to see. But I'll let Mr. Robertson tell us about it.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for having me. As Larry said, I work at Verkada, so I work primarily with small to mid-size state, local, and government agencies, so typically school districts, counties, cities. Been working here in your county with Pueblo County Library, working with their IT director and their community to secure their Rawlings branch and also the rest of their district. As Larry mentioned, he reached out and said there were some areas on the east side of your community that were, just kind of at a higher risk due to, as he mentioned, unsavory activities. And so he's looking for a solution that was going to be able to kind of help the residents feel like, hey, this is something we're being heard, this is a concern of ours, and also empowering your law enforcement. So we have a variety of solutions. Unfortunately, when we were trying to set up the connection to do a demonstration our two systems aren't talking, so I'm not able to do a demonstration now, but I did not want to make you feel like I wasted your time. So I would ask that if it's possible, Larry, I'm able to be moved to another work session to do a demonstration and fix the IT issues in the back. But if I had to summarize in a nutshell why you'd be interested, we make it easy to put cameras up in areas that don't have internet or don't have power. And that's a huge bottleneck for most systems. So what we're able to do is put our cameras on, picture a shoebox that has power and connectivity in it, and then you can deploy those shoeboxes throughout your community wherever you may have issues. Some things that are really beneficial for your law enforcement are the ability to upload photos of, sexual offenders, predators, most wanted. And when those faces are seen on those cameras, your law enforcement will be notified. In addition, if you do have a smaller patrolling unit, you're actually able to arm your sites after hours so that if something happens, like there's activity behind the Dollar General, or there's a license plate of interest seen at a particular park of yours, that video will be, raised to a real person to verify and then sent to your law enforcement. So it's all about being able to deploy in areas that don't have infrastructure and then having proactive tools to identify scenarios that your community said, hey, these are at-risk areas. Maybe there are a lot of homelessness, trashing a certain park or vandalizing, certain public spaces, being able to set up alerts so that your law enforcement are made aware of them in real time. But that's, if I had to put it in a nutshell, I would say.
Part of it has to do with identification. For instance, if, let's say, a burglary happened and one of the community members saw a person with a pink jacket right about that time,
Yep.
on the video, you just pull up someone with a pink jacket and it shows you time, place of anyone with a pink jacket.
It's a great way
It
to do
doesn't
it.
identify the person. This isn't face recognition type software, but it does recognize someone with a pink jacket. It also has a license plate reading capability. I'll give you an idea. I was talking to somebody in the community, and they said, what would be a really good idea is to put a camera at all of the exits on the east side. There's 7 exits from the east side. If somebody did something and something happened down, let's say in the middle of east side, they try to get out of there as fast as they can. Well, at 9:05 p.m., something happened on 4th Street someplace, and at 5:06 p.m., a car was leaving the scene, so to speak. We'd get a license plate read, and we could go after that person, just like that. It should be said, I've been talking to Deputy Chief Martin about this, and he's been talking to the Chief of Police. The ultimate goal, is to have a real-time crime center whereby we have cameras all over the city with a cadre of people sitting around a desk, let's say, with a wall full of monitors with a camera pointing in every direction. So we could really keep an eye on absolutely everything that's happening in the city. I talked to Dan Gagosic about this. There are or might be some issues with the First Amendment or with identification purposes, but from what I understand is a general type surveillance system would probably be permissible. Face recognition, for instance, is out, for instance.
All the actions in the system are logged, so there's a full transparent list of everything, how the system is being used. Because, again, it is a surveillance tool, and you don't want your community members to feel like you're over their shoulder peering down on them. So there is a level of transparency into the actions that are being taken. And, I think I've seen a lot of general interest in the Pueblo area. So working with Tim Winters at the county, and also Darren Cochis, the new Building and Safety Security Director. There are a lot of concerns over at Runyon Park because there are a lot of smash and grabs. So they're looking at the solution of being able to deploy our cameras on the light poles and secure that parking lot area. And so it seems like your community is growing and expanding. And as you grow and expand, if you stick with the traditional system, you have to buy the camera and a lot of back-end hardware that supports that camera. So the footprint becomes bigger. And so with our system, you just have a camera. So we have less hardware, and the hardware we do provide has a 10-year product warranty that includes overnight replacement, support, and warranty. So we're much from a cost perspective, we have transparent costs as what our unit will be over the next 10 years, and then we make it easy to scale. So you're not, if you add additional parks or, continue your Runyon Park walk pathway, you can easily add cameras without having to buy additional hardware to add those new cameras to your system.
Yeah.
So,
And I should also say that the ultimate decision basically is through the IT department and the police department and the mayor's office. Between those three, I'm just bringing a concern from the community. How we do it, who we do it with, when we do it is going to be up to the experts, basically. The police department would know where to put the cameras. IT department would know how to do the technical part, and of course, the mayor's going to pay for it. Or we're going to pay for it, so. But the community wants something. More and more people are putting cameras in their businesses, more and more agencies are doing it. So, and they're all that could be interconnected. So we could pull up a lot of information. And we talk about public safety all the time. This is one tool.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. I think let's definitely have you back, but in the meantime, I know if there's questions here from counselors that hopefully you can answer
course, yeah.
right now. Counselor Flores?
To reconfirm, you said that this is not facial recognition, it's not.
there is the capability to do facial recognition, for example, like a matching game, but if you uploaded a photo of me from like an incident, it wouldn't tell you that my name is Michael Roberts and I live at Church Street. It would just look for, where has your face been seen on other cameras? Now, you as an organization would have the ability to say, this is enabled in our system or it's not. So if that's something that's outside of your guidelines, then you would just turn that feature off and leverage what Larry was mentioning is, can you show me all the people who appear to be male in a pink shirt? General analytics.
The other thing is that communities that sign up with your company, and there's a contractual arrangement there. Do you provide protection to the community in the event of an invasion of privacy lawsuit as a result of your cameras taking photos in a neighborhood and someone were to sue the city of Pueblo, as an example? Does your contracts provide any kind of hold harmless to communities in the event that we're sued for invasion of privacy?
So to clarify, the question is, would Verkada accept liability if our system was claimed or alleged to be misused? I don't believe so. And I think that would be most likely the case with most solutions. As a tool, it's policies and procedures, would shape the use of the system.
But in the event of this equipment, do you retain ownership and we're just leasing it?
No, sir, it's all yours.
It's going to be ours?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just to clarify.
Yep.
I noticed that we do have 6 pages of PowerPoint here. They're very general about your
Yes.
company. Is that what you were going to show us tonight?
No, sir. So what I was going to show you is what your law enforcement, like Chief Martin, might see
Okay.
when you log into the dashboard and you see all your cameras at all your sites, and you say, hey, I was made aware by our Park and Recs department that there was an issue at this one location.
Right.
And I would show you how, at a real simple level, it's easy to find footage, save it, both for court purposes. We do a lot of election security with the 90 days of retention, and then how we make it easy to share your footage, both from a historical standpoint and also a live stream, which I think is one of the elements that attracted Larry, is the ability to go ahead and share camera links to live view. So if you were working with Sandra and the Pueblo Housing Authority and they had one of their apartment complexes with a playground, well, maybe, they would like to give access to that camera feed of the play structure to the PD so that everybody could kind of watch that camera. Those are some of the features that would come along with it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Counselor Martinez-Ortega?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to your presentation, and as we all know, cameras don't stop crime, correct? Like, they don't stop crime.
No, sir, they don't stop crime.
And so if we're looking at putting this on every exit and entrance of the east side, how does that not over-criminalize one area of town? And how do we avoid being set up for lawsuit from some of the organizations for over criminalizing one area, because those cameras don't stop crime, they react to crime. And then at that point, the police react to that crime. And then people in that area of town are being over criminalized because it's not anywhere else. Everywhere else has just as much crime. But when we're looking only at one under a microscope, that one section of town will be askew
Let
from
me
all
answer
numbers.
that. I only use that as an example because somebody told me that I was talking to about it. He lives on the east side, and he said if a crime is committed in the east side, the perpetrator's probably skedaddling out of it. We could put it on the exits of Belmont, downtown, anywhere in town. If we had a complete
So my
scan of
question
the whole
is-
city, we wouldn't be criminalizing one part of the city.
Well, my question is, how do we video or like record the entire city? Do we have to record the entire city to avoid lawsuit? So I'm asking the legal department that. How does this not translate to future lawsuits?
Well, let me start by asking a question from our presenter.
Yes, sir.
In your work with local governments, the cameras are limited to the public right-of-way, the streets, the sidewalks. The placement is limited to property owned by the government. If you want to surveil private property, you're going to have to get consent, right, from the property owner, both in terms of the placement of the camera and, what's being surveilled. So what you're talking about is just public roads, streets, intersections, things in the public right-of-way or parks
Yes, sir.
owned by the city.
Yep.
We're not going to surveil,
Every street corner and every road.
no. And
No, sir.
then the second part of my question is, most of the light poles, telephone poles, are owned by the utilities.
Black Hill, correct?
So we have a street light. That pole is not owned by the city, it's owned by the utility. The same with telephone poles or poles used to transmit electricity. Those are not owned by the city. So how is that worked out in other jurisdictions where we rightfully want to look at an intersection to see who comes and goes, but where are we going to put the camera? I mean, I guess we could put it on the red light fixture. We own that, but not much else.
I would say keeping in mind the goal of public safety, I think there's an opportunity for your leadership to deploy cameras throughout your city in problematic areas. But if you focus on business districts like Larry was kind of sharing with me, I think you are presenting your business owners with an opportunity to have additional police coverage for the exchange of being able to use their physical brick and mortar space. So if I'm the Dollar General and I'm the 7-Eleven, I have physical infrastructure there that the city would lack, but I have a huge problem. Well, if you let us put our cameras up here, we'll allow you to have access as a live view only to the cameras right outside your shop, so you benefit and can see that if you'd like, because you're able to generate a link. But at the same time, we get your leadership, like your police department, would have additional coverage and get around the infrastructure bottleneck.
Well, let's say there's a camera on a pole in a parking lot for Dollar General,
Yes, sir.
and the city owns the camera, we have permission. We're not going to share that video with Dollar General. I mean, that,
That would
for
be,
police purposes only, correct?
that would be up to your community on how you choose to use that. One nice feature of our system is if I'm the police chief, I can have these cameras and I can engage with them at all levels. However, I can also generate a link that just allows somebody to view that camera. So the same way kind of people would come to your website and, would watch your city hall presentation, not being able to engage, but at least being able to see what was going on. So it's like, hey, I can see outside my shop or behind my dollar store general. I can't do anything with that video. It's just a live stream if you choose to give them access. But what's nice is it's kind of like a nice little easy way for the city to say thank you for letting us use your space without tying any real dollar value to that interaction.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of legal details to be worked out.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, how does this not open us up to lawsuits, Dan? How do we implement this without being sued for either the invasion of privacy or just putting one section of town under a microscope?
Well, I think it has to be driven. There has to be a factual predicate for where you put the camera. If it's a high crime area, if it's a multiple, motor
Accidents.
vehicle accident area, that's fine. But our cameras are going to be limited to streets and roadways and sidewalks. And I am nervous about the link or the cooperation with Dollar General. They'll have their own camera.
Yes, sir. The ultimate decision
And
sits at your
I
level.
really don't want to share, city camera data with anyone except the police.
Yeah. And you guys would have the ability to make that decision. You say, hey, we will, or no, we won't. But it rests, you have the power to make that.
Mayor?
Yeah, I just want everybody to know, remember that we've entered in some agreements with the El Camino Homeowners Association, where they have installed cameras at the entrances to El Camino. And the police department has access to that footage if and when they think it's necessary to review that. So in El Camino, there's only 3 ways in and out, but those cameras have the ability to record everybody entering or leaving, so that if there's a burglary and somebody identifies a blue truck, I couldn't tell you whether those cameras have been effective in, apprehending individuals or not, but it's available. And it has been, I think it's been up and operating for about a year. But those are not our cameras. Those belong to the homeowners association, but we have access to them.
So they're criminalizing themselves.
They're,
Just joking.
Councilor Maestri?
I see you have a lot of possibilities. How many municipalities have their law enforcement divisions with your setup?
Yeah. The city of Trinidad, the city of Glendale, the city of Wheat Ridge, Montezuma County, Conejos County, town of Pagosa Springs. We're currently doing a RFP for their Park and Recs department.
So as an example, an RFP for the Parks and Rec Department, the Parks and Rec Department is soliciting you to put cameras in the parks.
So the project with the town of Pagosa Springs is they're having a large issue with homeless folks camping out in their restrooms and destroying their properties, and also dealing with fights in their skate bowl. So it's like the deepest part people can stand and not be seen. So what we've done is very similar to what Larry's proposing, is we sent them a few trial cameras to set up around their problematic areas and to say, hey, does this work for you? Does this give you the coverage that you're looking for? And then I went in front of their city council as well and did a presentation, working with their law enforcement, who also sees value in this. And then the budget was approved, and they could either choose to procure via the state contract NASPO or with just Colorado specific or PEPM, but they chose to go to a bid just to see what other solutions were.
So these cameras are just to one area owned by the city? They're not set out through all the intersections and so forth within the city?
At the city of Glendale, who was not the original customer that who they transacted with, they do have our cameras at different light poles and throughout their city. So they use it as more of a data gathering tool. Most of the city leadership that I worked with outside of Park and Recs is very much like perimeter coverage. They want to be able to see their sidewalks, their parking lots, their doors. And sometimes they do have, remote facilities that they like to monitor as well. But that's typically how I've seen it used.
And the cost?
And so it would depend. So we're like Honda, I like just cars, and the person that you would work with would be like the folks at the dealership. So we can partner with any person or like reseller that you work with, and that would be who you transact with. I'm able, in full transparency, to give 40% off of our MSRP pricing, and that's available for all of you guys to go look at.
About how much does a system cost for an area like Larry's talking about?
So for 2 cameras at each location and small power box, you're looking at between $8,000 to $9,000. And again, that's a camera that comes with a 10-year product warranty. That's also the battery pack that comes along with it. I don't know how much the installation would be just because I'm not personally an installer. But what's nice is our cameras, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but they have guaranteed 30 days retention, 24/7 recording, all at a high image quality, which you often don't see with traditional cameras. If you want 24/7, you got to pay for more. If you want it to be higher quality, you got to pay for more. Yeah.
So what's the success rate in these communities that you've installed cameras? Have you heard?
Yeah, I think the city of Wheat Ridge, they really like us. They deployed our cameras at their recreation center to start out with, and they caught smash and grabs going on in the parking lot. And we've rolled it out to City Hall, their police department, their park and forestries, their public works, their active adult center, and their Anderson pool. The same with Trinidad. We started out with their fire stations. We rolled out to the remote fuel sites. We had planned at the City Hall. And I think one thing that speaks to it is you're seeing interest and customer satisfaction from very large organizations all the way down to like smaller, the Pueblo School of Arts. They're currently a Verkada customer and have been for several years. So I just think that speaks to our testament of truly delivering a controlled cost system and a system that's easy to use.
I guess it would have to tie into, with law enforcement and the judicial system because we don't seem to have a very good conviction rate these days throughout the state. And so does it, how does it help us with that? Because, we can invest in cameras, but if we can't prosecute people,
So our
their
cameras,
offenses.
because they do record 24/7, whenever you save historical footage, they have a watermark in the upper left-hand corner that has the time, date, and location of the footage. It makes that footage permissible in court. And in transparency, I think there's a unique opportunity right now with your housing authority. So they're going to RFP for a security system here in a few weeks. And when I spoke with Sandra, she mentioned they had over 1,400 managed properties. And so I think, what did Chief Martin share on our call? And he said, I'd ideally like to see Pueblo with a crime center. And so if these are government-owned locations and Verkada has less hardware to deploy, well, I see that being an opportunity to really tie in two government entities leveraging their existing footprint.
But then you're putting the people under housing under a microscope. Do you understand how that could be problematic?
For sure. So in regards to your question that you asked earlier, how is it to be perceived if we put cameras, in a large volume in one area of the city without putting it in the other? I think that if you live in the community, you most likely know where the problem areas are. And if your law enforcement was able to deploy security cameras that allowed them to be notified proactively of risk versus potentially someone having to report it, I think that provides a value to be notified like in advance. And it seems like these wouldn't be pointed at homes, but more so along like your infrastructure and where the river tends to be, and homeless folks coming out. So where you're having problems, which I think is the focus of the cameras.
Well, as they know, cameras don't stop crime. And if that technique would have worked, then it would continue to happen and it would have been expounded on, but it hasn't. So I just don't think that.
So, but would you say that security cameras help reduce crime?
No, they just help criminalize what they catch.
I think there'd be folks who say security cameras help reduce, but again, I'm not a police officer and I don't claim to be. I can only speak to the other law enforcement agencies that have leveraged us. And if I had a park near my house where homeless folks were going and there was a constant issue, I'd like there to be a little additional coverage, especially if I have to take my kids past there.
So what police find is that it's the in-person, that's what stops bad behavior, not cameras. Because again, cameras don't catch everything and they're, yeah.
They're just a tool, and it's effective on how you use it. But I think the intention here is to give the folks who may not have a voice some additional resources to help feel like their neighborhood is safe too.
Any other questions for Mr. Robertson? It sounds like he's going to come back to do the full
Click
show
through,
and
yes,
tell.
yeah.
Yep. So let's pause this conversation, and then maybe at that time we can invite Chief Knoller for questions, because it seems like a lot of these are PD related. So at that time, we'll have our Chief of Police here as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mr. Robertson. Okay, up next, speaking of police, up next we have the Denver Star Program. So can I please have Miss Cylon to the podium? So you want to press there we go.
There we go.
And whenever you're ready.
Good evening, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and talk to you about some of the alternative response work that we've been doing in Denver. Do we have my slides? Okay. Great, thank you. So I'm Carly Salon. I'm the Star Operations Manager at Denver 911 Communications, and wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we've kind of arrived on alternative response in Denver. So we've been running a longstanding co-responder program in Denver since 2016. So we started with 4 clinicians who were riding along with Denver police officers, and we're up to just over 42, working 24/7, 365 throughout the entire city. That program very well received by DPD, very successful, and is still running today. But in managing that program, what we really noticed was that we were sending our co-responder programs, clinician and police, to a lot of calls that were really centered around the work that the clinician was doing, and the officer wasn't needed for any sort of scene safety or risk component. These were calls that were focused on issues dealing with poverty, homelessness, lack of access to healthcare, need for resources. So our clinician skills were needed, but our officers were not needed. So what we wanted to do was start thinking about additional options that we could create in the city of Denver that would send the right response to community members in need. Keep our co-responder teams responding to higher acuity risk calls with the behavioral health component. So we were still getting that clinical support and connection to resources on those higher acuity scenes, but that we could deploy a more appropriate response to these low risk, low acuity calls that were coming into 911 or the non-emergency system. So that's kind of how we arrived on the STAR program. It stands for Support Team Assisted Response. We're based off the CAHOOTS model in Eugene, Oregon, which has been running an alternative response program dispatched through their 911 communication center successfully for over 30 years. And we actually did a site visit out to Eugene back in May of 2019, came back to Denver, worked for about a year on what this model would look like in a larger metro area, and rolled out STAR on June 1st of 2020. And our team pairs a licensed or working towards licensure mental health clinician and a paramedic or an EMT, and they're dispatched over the police channel by 911 communications and sent to these calls to assist members of our community in need. So when we started out, we selected a set of nature codes with 911, with their help, that indicated that a member of our community was in need of some sort of assistance and generally don't include any sort of risk component. Now, that being said, all of the calls coming into Denver 911 communications, either on our 911 line or our non-emergency line, are going through the same screening and triage process. So they're asking questions about emergent medical need, safety concerns, what's the general nature of the call, what's the call priority, how quickly do we need to get a response there. So they're gathering all of that important information, and then what they do is if a call is low risk, low acuity, and appropriate for civilian response, they'll flag it in our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch system, and that communicates to the police dispatcher that STAR should be sent. So you could see STAR responds to the list of calls up there, and that's kind of where we started. Assist, which indicates that a member of our community is in need of some sort of general assistance. They don't have access to food for the evening. They need connection to a food bank. They took the bus from Philly to Denver and ran out of money and don't know where they're going to go for shelter that evening. We respond to trespass calls, intoxicated parties, individuals who are experiencing behavioral health crisis. So you guys can see the whole list of calls, welfare check as well. But important to note that just because those nature codes are on a list that is eligible for STAR response, STAR doesn't necessarily respond to 100% of those calls. So take indecent exposure, for example. We get an indecent exposure call about an unhoused woman who's changing clothes in an alley. STAR would respond to that, try to connect her to a day shelter, a facility that has a private area for her to change, showers, maybe connection to other services. But we wouldn't respond to predatory indecent exposure at a playground, let's say. We would still be sending the police to that. So just important to note that we are only responding to the calls that are determined STAR appropriate in this set of nature codes. So this is kind of a breakdown of our assignment mechanism. About 70% of our calls are flagged in 911 dispatch, and STAR is the first and only responder on that scene. A little over 20% of our calls are requests from our patrol officers in Denver. So a call comes in, sounds like it needs a police officer. Denver police are sent. They arrive, recognize that the situation that they're encountering isn't exactly what was reported, right? It's more appropriate for STAR. They can key up on the radio and request the STAR van to come and take over the call. STAR will arrive, that police officer leaves and can get back into service, working through their queue on more pressing public safety needs. So this acts like as a force multiplier for our police department as well. They're not bogged down trying to play case manager, clinician, and are able to deal with law enforcement and public safety needs. And then STAR initiates a little bit of response in the field. So the best type of 911 call is the one that doesn't happen. So if we see somebody having a big behavior outside Starbucks, see someone sitting on a curb downtown crying, we'll hold ourselves out and try to interact with that person and head off a call coming into 911. So this is some of our data since we've rolled out the pilot. So you can see actually this, I checked this morning, we have responded to just over 8,500 calls for service that would have otherwise been dispatched to police, and we haven't had to call for emergent police backup on any of those calls. That's a huge time saver for our police, and we can also, make sure that those individuals in our community who are in crisis got the appropriate responders in those moments. Really looking at adding a pathway for connection to community resources and behavioral health resources to sort of our traditional response pathways of police, fire, and EMS. The chart with the blue bars are our most common calls. So our top three are welfare check, assist, and unwanted trespass calls, welfare check, and assist. So those are the calls that we're most frequently responding to in the community. And the colorful chart there on the right are our STAR identified calls. So what we've been doing since the rollout of the pilot is flagging all of the STAR appropriate calls coming in citywide, no matter what time of day. So 24/7, 365, our 911 call takers are flagging star appropriate calls. So this piece of data gave us a really good idea of when our highest call volume time was. You can see it starts to pick up around 6 a.m. That's by time of day and day of week, and it starts to drop off around 10 p.m. So using that data, we were able to deploy our citywide resources from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week so that we could make sure that we were kind of serving the highest need time for the community. I think I have one more. And that is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For that presentation. What questions are there from council? Councilor Flores.
You know, we have several people that do follow up on calls like this, and I'm trying to decipher what the comparison is of what we're doing and what you're doing. And did somebody ask them to come make this presentation this evening? It sounds like you have thought of a lot of stuff here. I mean, and I'm not sure that, it seems to me that we need whoever is in charge within our police department with our mental health people to kind of contrast what you're doing and what maybe we need to upgrade or modify or make better. And I think that would be the next step, a logical step, because it sounds like you have a lot of experience and you've had a lot of success. If you could translate the amount of calls that you've intercepted, so where the police don't have to go out, does that translate into what the police department in Denver has saved as far as
Well, it does. And, you know, our police department in Denver is very busy, so they have plenty of business, even with us offloading that number of calls. But I think, yes, it does save police time, right? That's a police officer that can be dispatched to a higher priority call versus having to go on an assist call or a welfare check, right? We can also, you know, connect folks in a more efficient way to supports and resources so that they're not popping up on the 911 system. And, you know, a police officer might take the time to do that on a scene, but he would probably, you know, need to look some things up, maybe make some phone calls. It's not really their wheelhouse or what they're trained in, right? So we're sending the right experts to these calls to make sure that there's an additional connection beyond that crisis touch point so that folks aren't popping up on the radar of 911 and law enforcement in the future. And to your point, you know, there are several agencies doing this work throughout the country, really. And just like we sort of looked to Cahoots and what they were doing and then tweaked it, I would encourage, you know, Pueblo to do the same. What works in one area works in one area, and every community really needs to take a look at what their need is and then replicate in a way that's useful for them.
I think the benefit of your program is that you're getting help for people that are in crisis. They don't need a police officer. They need a direction or help or, you know, some sort of mental health counseling, whatever, and that's where you're directing them. I really appreciate you sharing your information. It seems to me that the next step would be for our chief of police to kind of bring the two together and kind of contrast what we can learn from the city of Denver. And I just appreciate you making your presentation tonight.
Of course.
It's very enlightening, so thank you.
So just to give some history, this actually came about when we were talking very seriously about the no sit, no lie ordinance. And as an alternative of, hey, if there's someone experiencing homelessness in crisis, instead of calling 911, which would then increase, you know, them responding to that situation instead of the really heavy crimes that are going on, 211. And so instead of 211, and then Chief Miller did a really great job of being like, actually, Denver's implementing a very similar thing to 211 called the STAR program, which is why our friend Carly is here today. So I think it could be a really good program for Pueblo. I know that Chief Miller has been in conversations with Carly, maybe. So I know that relationship is built. Councilor Maestri?
So out of the 8,100 calls, say, is that what you've determined to be an incident, or do you actually get more calls than that?
So we actually get a bit more calls than that. So we ran a one-van pilot program for about a year to gather some data and also sort of as proof of concept. And then 2022, we expanded citywide. So we currently have 5 vans deployed 7 days a week between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Based on the data, we still have a little bit of a gap. So we're adding 3 additional vans in 2023, and we think that that's going to bring us to full capacity because there are some calls that we're not making it to.
And what is your annual budget for that?
So we also have some budget money set aside to fund community supports and services so that STAR could make a direct referral to those agencies. I believe our initial budget for the 5 vans was about $2 million, and then about 1.5 for the additional 3 this year. And we are able to offset a good amount of our budget through Medicaid billing as well.
So when you say vans, are you including the employee with that
Yes,
van?
yes,
Okay.
two staff per van.
2 staff per van?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, is that separate from the police budget? Or
Yes.
Okay. Do you work through, is your a department a branch of the police department?
No, so our contract is actually housed within Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. Our initial pilot contract was through DPD, and then there was a push from the community and our city council to move that contract out of DPD and into public health. So the contract is managed through our Department of Public Health. I work managing the operations through Denver 911, which is under our Department of Safety, and then we contract with community providers who provide the actual staff on the vans.
And what it would be like the incident that you would deploy on a family disturbance? Because we know that some domestic violence is some of the most dangerous things
Absolutely.
to respond to
So,
for an officer.
We're actually looking to roll out a response to that nature code here in the next few weeks. So STAR would deploy to a verbal argument between non-intimate family partners. If there was a domestic violence incident, we would deploy a co-responder team, so a mental health clinician and a police officer, mainly because there are so many protections that are offered to victims of domestic violence. As a clinician myself, or even a medic, we're just not well-versed. That's not our lane, right? So we want clinical support there for that victim, but we also want them to get the appropriate legal advice too. So that would be probably deployed to our co-responder team. But we are deploying STAR to, juvenile situations in the home or family disputes that are between non-intimate partners.
And that is just to the city of Denver, correct? None of the surrounding communities like Aurora or Glenwood or any of those?
Just City and County of Denver for STAR. Aurora does have their own program that they rolled out a pilot shortly after we did, and they're expanding as well. So there is collaboration between those 2 teams because we share a border and see the same folks on occasion.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Counselor Wenner?
Yeah. Just from what you mentioned, that you are on contract or under contract with the city of Denver, I think that that's really important for our city. I just found out recently that we're not under contract with Health Solutions. So I think it's important to have that entity under contract in some way.
Definitely, and I was on the side of the contract providers when we rolled out the pilot, and have now moved towards the city. And being able to contract with the city allowed us to access the infrastructure that really makes STAR successful, such as 911 and dispatch.
It also makes you accountable to the city.
Yes.
Other questions? Can you tell me a little bit about how the community has responded to STAR and how police department has responded to the STAR program?
Absolutely. I think oftentimes folks assume that we have an adversarial relationship with the police, that we would be taking business from them. We have a great working relationship with DPD from their command staff and the chief's office, but also with the patrol officers, which I think is really important because those officers are out there doing this work every day and really see this as a valuable resource. It frees their time up to go deal with their very busy call queue. It also, helps them feel like they don't have to switch roles all the time, right? Like they have to be a police officer, but also be a clinician and a case manager and all these other things that they're tasked with. So it's been really well received by DPD. They're constantly asking when we're getting more vans, and they see it as a huge asset to their department. And the community as well, the folks that we're responding to, we've heard time and time again that this felt like a supportive resource, that we're able to get folks the help that they need. And we're also looking forward to this community supports contract that's going to kick in this year, that's really going to take us to the next level in terms of connecting our folks to culturally appropriate, geographically convenient resources throughout the city.
Counselor Graham.
Can you tell us a little bit about what typically happens when you respond to a call? And, is there a facility that you're able to take the individuals to? Because in our community, we're lacking, that part of the programming too.
And that does, that would be a challenge. I mean, everywhere is not Denver, right? We do have a lot of resources. We're lucky enough to have 2 24/7, 365 crisis centers, one that's open to the general public and one that is first responder only drop off. So we access those facilities quite a bit. We're also very connected to our local day shelters, our local syringe exchange, the Harm Reduction Action Center, health centers, our community clinics, really letting the folks that we're responding to identify what's going to solve their crisis. And sometimes we're connecting folks to one of those, community resources, and other times it's, I'm in crisis because of this reason, and if we could solve this, I'm no longer in crisis. Sometimes it's a ride. Sometimes it is just someone to listen to them and talk to them about whatever they're experiencing in that moment. So, we show up, we introduce ourselves, we try to be very client-directed, we wear street clothes, we have sort of an outreach look to us, and really just taking the time that we need to work with that person and help them sort of identify what would be helpful for them in that moment. So we do have places that we can transport folks to, and, there's never a day on Star that looks the same as the one before, right? And you're kind of beholden to what you come across. But we've helped folks, that were visiting Denver, that, had gotten stranded in Denver, that live in Denver. It really is a huge array of different scenarios that we're coming in contact with every day.
Great. Counselor Winter?
So how do we move forward with something like this? Would you expand into this area under your company, or how does this work exactly?
Well, I think you probably have community partners in Pueblo that are probably more well-established in this area and would be better suited just because they're already familiar with all of those community resources and have been doing this work in this community in one fashion or another already. But we could absolutely offer, technical assistance. We could share lessons learned and policies and procedures that we're using at 911. I think one of the most important first steps would be to engage with your 911 dispatch and figure out how, that process would work, because that really is the bread and butter of how you get to calls, right? And engaging those community partners, also engaging members of the community, folks with lived experience. They, should be at the table as well in terms of determining what this looks like in Pueblo.
I think our issue is a contract. I think we need to be under contract. I really do. So I don't know how we can move forward with that.
Counselor Flores?
You work for the city of Denver.
I do, yes.
So you're not a company. I think there's a misunderstanding that we can contract with you when you're simply here for
Right.
providing us with information.
Definitely. And our responders that are out on the van, the clinicians work for our large mental health agency in Denver, WellPower, and the paramedics or EMTs are supplied by our local paramedic division, Denver Health Paramedic Division. So I think, you would have to identify who the key players here in Pueblo would be and get those folks to the table to try to figure out what next steps were.
That would be Health Solutions, and then we probably should look at enhancing our contract with them.
We don't have a contract. Sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah, I don't know whether we do or not, but any event, whether we develop a new contract or not, you're encouraging us to work with the largest health, probably the largest mental health organization in our community, and that would be Health Solutions.
And I believe you guys also have a co-responder program already running here in Pueblo. This could, be an extension of that program. That would probably be the path of least resistance.
Right, get them some vans.
Which, order them now, they're hard to come by.
Yeah, I think that this is a win-win. It's a win for PD, it's a win for, having a trauma-informed approach. So I think let's have maybe staff follow up and for implementing this or seeing how we can implement this locally. And council can fund it but just bankroll it.
So again, I think we have these services. I just think we need a contract that's a commitment to what they're supposed to be doing. So as Dan Kurgosic said, they are not under contract with us. Health Solutions is not. So there's not really any accountability.
So I think let's pull them into a conversation. Staff can meet with Health Solutions and go from there. Great. Thank you so much, Carly. I so appreciate it.
Of course, thank you so much, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions along the way.
We will. Yeah. Thank you. This is great. Okay, then our last on our agenda is the Union and Maine Final Master Plan. So I see Mr. Hayes is coming. Can I have Miss Atten? Oh, who is on Zoom. And so is Mr. Lee.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of council. Tonight, we're going to give a quick update on the status of the Union and Maine revitalization project. I'm going to turn it over quickly just since we're short on time, but our consultant, Bill Hannon Houston, is here, and I'm going to introduce Jared Lee to take over from here.
Thank you, Andrew. I just shared the screen. Can you guys see that okay?
It's getting there.
Starting
I
to
think
come.
it's still processing.
Okay. And I'll just start with some quick introductions then. Good evening, members of the council. Thank you for having us tonight. I know we're pressed for time, so hopefully we'll go through this quickly. As Andrew said, I'm Jared Lee with Bohannon Houston, and I'm the design engineering principal for the project. I also have my colleague Denise Ayton on with me as well. She leads our planning group and also led the master planning effort for the Union Avenue and Main Street Master Plan.
Good evening.
Can you guys see okay?
It's not showing up yet, Jared.
See what I can do here.
We see it now.
Okay, great. Awesome. So as I mentioned, we're here tonight. I'll go through this fairly quickly. I know we're pressed for time. So hopefully to save some time for questions at the end, but also as I go through it, if somebody wants to see something in more detail, please let me know. But we're going to give a quick update on the design process of this project. So this is it's also be a quick version of the presentation we gave to the public at our most recent public meeting last month. So that'll include a kind of an update on the project timeline as well as the project scope, a brief overview of that, and then also kind of a summary of what we heard at that meeting as well as our next steps. So for any of you that aren't familiar, this project includes the downtown corridors of Union Avenue and Main Street from City Center to Abriendo on Union and approximately C Street on Main Street. We actually go beyond that with some minor improvements down beyond the Arkansas River, but the core of it goes to C Street. And then the main focus was on those multimodal kind of making this multimodal corridor, so pedestrian access, parking, streetscape, and also includes funding from the county. So as I mentioned, we did go through an extensive master planning process, and starting back in 2020, and with that master planning document being accepted in 2021. This kind of gives a summary of some of the meetings and stakeholder coordination that we went through, as well as council presentation, and that highlighted meeting there December 13th was the most recent public meeting, which was really focused on the design phase that we've now kicked off. So we've just kind of started that phase this summer. We did a lot of the field work, and we're now moving forward into our design. We had our 30% review meeting with the city and CDOT last week, and went through that. So here's kind of an overview of the schedule. You can see we're kind of right in the middle of that design process. Again, working on those construction documents at this point, which we're hoping to have finished here in the spring, summer time, so that we can look at bidding and then going to construction in early 2024. And as we kicked off the design phase, we did take into consideration some of the things that we heard during the planning process that really were more of design issues and a deeper dive into things. So we have started to coordinate those efforts with our design. We've worked with the fire department on finalizing our turning radiuses and turning vehicles. We're looking at access and deliveries, as well as whatever accommodations we can make for the annual festivals and bicycle races. So we're working through some of those finer details and elements of the design. And like I said, I'll go through this fairly quickly, but I will say that a lot of this is very consistent with what you may have already seen and what was included in the master plan. So it's really getting into those details. But again, we're working on Union Avenue from Abriendo. Here's a segment from B Street. This is mostly paint and striping improvements to really just implement some more definition to the bike lanes, as well as the crosswalks. Sorry, it's jumped on me. But the bulk of Union Avenue's improvements really occur between B and Grand. So you can see here, we're really redeveloping that whole streetscape corridor to really make improvements. And the focus on Union is really on pedestrian access and the businesses that are there. So really focused on the kind of sidewalks, storefront, parking, those kind of elements. And you can see here we've got some typical sections of what that may look like. You can see here with really wide sidewalks, parking, and travel lanes. This is just another nice rendering of what that final product may look like. And make note of the dash line is really where the existing sidewalk is now. So we're really widening that out to make room for a lot of these improvements. We're also doing some improvements on the side streets C and D to also provide some additional sidewalk width and parking. And then as we get up towards Grand and City Center, again, a little less, a little limited on the improvements there. Most of that, again, is looking at striping and paint features to kind of improve that corridor as it exists. And then on Main Street, I mentioned we do have some improvements, back towards the river. This really is, again, just trying to improve the bike lanes that are there and tying those into the existing Arkansas Trail down to the river. And then again, the bulk of the work happens between C Street and really up to Allen Hamel. So you can see here again, making some more significant improvements to that streetscape with sidewalk and landscaping. And Main Street is the focus on that one that we heard is focusing on really those travelways. So prioritizing those and including dedicated bike lanes. So you can see that continues across the river walk up to Allen Hamel. Again, a typical section of what that will look like, and then a rendering as well. And then from Allen Hamel up to City Center, again, we've got some, maybe I'd say lesser improvements again to really just enhance that existing corridor and tie it into what's happening in that kind of core function. And this is just another typical section of that. We also presented some information on the landscaping and streetscaping, including trees. The existing trees was a big focus of the meeting. People want to know what's happening with those, so we are looking at that. The city has done an inventory of the existing trees and identified which ones are healthy and should be prioritized to remain, as well as several that are unhealthy and will be removed and replaced, as well as how we really incorporate those into the new design and set them up for the best success to thrive and be healthy. So here's a couple of examples of what that may look like. So we're working through some of those details now, but you can see there's lots of options for either working within the existing trees or if we're adding new trees, how those incorporate into that overall streetscape schematic. We also touched on some of the streetscape elements and really provided some opportunity for some input from the public on these. So we had some boards that they could look at in detail and provide their opinions on what they would like to see there, including the lighting and paving, as well as other amenities. And there's also a gateway option that we are planning for in this design to be incorporated. So something else that we did at the public meeting, I gave that presentation essentially, but then we also provided some time before and after for people to again look at some of that information on boards. And we also set up a little pop-up event that you can see the photos there in the corner. We kind of taped off 20-foot and 15-foot streetscape and then put some elements out there to really allow people to feel the difference that 5 foot makes and how much more space it provides for people. So if you have, if you have this streetscape and you need 2 foot along the curb for doors to open from the parking that will be there, and then you have a dedicated landscaping amenity zone, and then you have the area that needs to be set aside for walking, which at a minimum we outlined 6 feet, and then also provided some space for storefront. So again, providing that 20 feet provides a lot more opportunity for those amenities and that walking space. So that was a really great opportunity for people to feel what that felt like. So some of the feedback that we heard, there was a lot of conversations about the corridor and how it would function, specifically for bikes and pedestrians and traffic, as well as ADA accessibility. I mentioned the trees and landscaping. There's a lot of interest in that, as well as there were some individuals that own businesses that had specific interests and questions about how this corridor would function for them. And then I mentioned, sorry, on the back one, the boards. You can see in the kind of bottom right there, there's actually some little stickies that people were allowed to put on these boards to provide their preference. So you can see they really liked the streetscape themes centered around either the river or Chili's. So that's something that will be taken into consideration as we progress through the streetscape. So as we move forward, again, I mentioned the timeline here. We have this meeting tonight, but then we'll really be progressing into that final design and construction documents. We will follow it up with another public meeting and could come back to council as well to present that final design. And we'll really, at that time, be talking a lot more about the construction impacts and impacts to residents and businesses and users of the corridor, as well as that kind of construction timeline and providing some more details for that. But we also still have a couple opportunities. Our project website is up and we are still taking input from that, as well as sharing all of this information. So if anybody's interested, they can view that information on the website. And as always, they can email questions to us and the project team at the project email that you see here. So with that, I'll wrap up this presentation and we can take any questions that you may have, and I can circle back if somebody wants to look at something in more detail.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for that presentation. What questions are there from council? Mr. Lee, I've been asked if you could de-share your PowerPoint so that way our clerk can better view things. Great. What questions are there for Union and Main? Councilor Maestri.
When did this project initially start? What year?
So again, the master plan started back in 2020, but we kicked off this design portion this past summer of 2022.
What was the anticipated budget at the time in 2020?
Are you asking about construction budget?
Yes.
So in the master plan, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe roughly $8 million.
I think we're right around 9. Right.
And that was
That includes the design and the master planning effort and all of the various components of the project so far.
We're at 9?
I believe so. So 8 was the construction, and we're in the master planning, we're doing the design, all of those components together, along with construction, somewhere around $9 million total is what we've got budgeted from city, CDOT, and county funds.
And when is the anticipated start date?
So the design schedule that Jared put up there was basically we're working through design through middle of this year. The anticipated construction start date was late 2023, early 2024. I think that the actual start date of work is up for some discussion. We certainly have a lot of events in these corridors. We want to make sure that we're coordinating construction impacts with businesses, not impacting our Chamber of Commerce events that are downtown. We're working with them to make sure we're also addressing impacts to those. So nobody's in a rush to get into failure. So we just want to make sure that we get the schedule right and work through that. But right now, they're just working to the technical details of the design. As you mentioned, we're at a 30% design, expecting a final design and another public input session spring, summertime, late spring, early summertime.
As well as we do have some federal funds for construction, so we do have to get CDOT authorization and clearance to go to bid, and that takes a little bit of time to go through that process.
Oh my God, my allergies. All right, thank you.
And just to clarify really quick, so it's $9 million that's projected for the overall expense of the project. Can you clarify how much the city is putting in for that?
I would have to get the exact number here, but I think we've got about, it's a little more than $2 million, I believe, from CDOT. I think we also got $2 million from the county, and it's about $5 million from the city, approximately. Those are approximate numbers.
We're not funding the whole $9 million.
No,
Great.
no.
Councilman Flores.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify about the timeline. This all started, didn't it? It was a ballot issue that the county really drove forward, and that's where they got their initial $2 million amount.
Correct.
So they've been in control initially, because that ballot issue goes back quite a ways.
2016.
Yeah, so
Yes, sir.
it's been kind of stalled there because it was not nearly enough for this project.
Correct, and they had some different scopes. They had a scope for Main Street separate from Union. As the two came together and we were able to execute this master plan as one project, that's kind of come together with CDOT funding for some of the multimodal improvements, city funding for a portion, and then county as well.
I noticed that a portion of the work is going to have angled parking, like you do up on the Mesa Junction. I really like that kind of parking, but I noticed that on the photo on Main Street, everything still remains there. There wasn't enough room there, or it would have been nice to have had the angled parking there too. I just think you could park more people. It's easier to park.
So one good thing about Main Street is we do have a lot of parking facilities. We have a lot of city lots. We have the Main Street parking garage. We have the garage right across from the convention center as well. So there's a lot of public parking available in that block. And a lot of what we're trying to do is make sure that the Main Street corridor remains the thoroughfare for traffic and that pedestrians are able to get across that thoroughfare safely so it's accessible. But really focusing in on making Union that destination for folks to come and visit. It's going to be just a completely different feel on Union. I think that's where you're going to see the bulk of the big changes, but Main Street will also see some brush ups as well.
And my last question was the continuation of Union from the end of the Union Bridge up to Abriendo. Maybe I missed it, but what are you going to be doing from that point all the way up past the library? I thought I heard you say that was part of the project, was Abriendo.
Correct. So the Union Bridge portion, I believe, and Jared, jump in if I'm overspeaking here, but the primarily Union Bridge is going to be paint and markings improvements to try to channelize traffic and transition from what's currently there into this narrowed traffic, heavily pedestrian-friendly environment that's going to be the Union corridor there between B Street and the Riverwalk primarily. Again, as you transition back towards City Center, again, some more paint and markings improvements, but a lot of streetscape along the way. Again, very much wider pedestrian walkways, room for cafes, for sitting areas, for other amenities in there for people to come and enjoy the space on Union.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Is the speed limit going to change, Andrew? Because I feel like people, especially once they come down that hill, they just fly.
Right. So the speed limit's part of the design process, what the speed limit itself will be, but there are going to be some other traffic calming features incorporated in the design. So let's say C Street and D Street for sure will have four-way stops. So there are going to be some vehicle, traffic calming features kind of built into the process here. So it's not going to be a speeding thoroughfare down Union. It's also going to be a narrower lane. I think in general, drivers who encounter wide swaths of pavement maybe psychologically feel like there's a little more space to maneuver and inherently go a little faster. That's going to be reduced somewhat here. And so it's going to feel a little bit tighter. Speeds are going to slow down. You've also got the stop signs to contend with. And it's really designed to be a pedestrian friendly environment, but certainly bicycles are going to be encouraged to come down. There'll be shared lanes there, and the traffic speeds will be much, much lower than what you're seeing now.
Great. Seeing Councilor Maestri.
Andrew, what are they going to do about the scooters? Are they going to have to stay in the bike lanes, or are they going to continue to blast down the sidewalks? Or do we need to put an ordinance in place for that? That's pretty,
Sure. So at this moment, the scooters are supposed to be ridden in the right-of-way, not on the sidewalks, right? So there's not an express scooter lane or anything like that. Again, traffic speeds being slower on Union, those scooters will be much, much closer to traffic speed. So it's not something that's going to be holding up a vehicle per se. It's going to feel a little bit more natural to have those scooters in that environment. But because it's a pedestrian environment on the sidewalks, the scooters are not intended to be on the sidewalk.
Thank you.
Great. Seeing no other questions then from council. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, and thank you to Mr. Lee and Ms. Atten for that presentation. That concludes our work session. The time is 6:59, and I'm going to adjourn this work session at this time. We're going to have a brief 10-minute recess before the regular meeting starts in about 10-ish minutes.
Thank you.